Well, hello, Mayor Wes Perry.
Hello.
How are things?
It's very good, thanks.
Very good.
Appreciate you.
We're here to talk about the state of the city.
Yes.
Let's talk about the state of the Perrys.
The state of the Perrys. Well, let's see. I've been married for 34 years. Married my high school sweetheart, and we've got 3 kids. All of them are grown now. We have 4 grandkids, and all of us live here in Midland. So it's really a blessing. My youngest son actually lives in Dallas and working, but you know, it's really great having our grandkids here.
It's wonderful. I bet holidays are a lot of fun at your house.
It's pretty crazy. We have everybody over Christmas. Everybody just kind of lounged around in their pajamas and watched movies and just had a really, really special time.
Come on, there weren't any fights?
No fights. We get along pretty well. Now the grandkids, that's a little different story, but the adults get along pretty well.
I want that truck.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. They do that, and then they want to be outside, you know, chasing our dogs or chickens or something. So it's just crazy at our house sometimes.
Oh, hold on. I know you didn't just say you have chickens in your backyard.
Yeah, we have a little bit of acreage, and so we live right at the edge of town, and so we have some land. We have chickens and coyotes and some rattlesnakes occasionally, and it's
so the
like
coyotes
the farm.
and rattlesnakes were not planned.
They're not planned, but they're the residents, so we have to kind of deal with that a little bit. But no, we're really we have a great place.
Do you gather eggs?
Yeah, every morning.
No, you don't.
Serious? No, no. My wife will be mad at me when I say you with that question, because she's the one that really gathers the eggs.
But you have fresh eggs at your house.
Yes, we do.
That is remarkable.
It's pretty.
Now, see, we've
different.
learned something already in the first minute of the state of the city.
Well, thanks. It's a funny thing. It is what it is, really.
Now, you've been in office for how long?
Let's see. This will actually be my 9th year. I was on city council for 5 years, and then I ran for mayor. And that's a 3-year term, and so I'm now in my beginning of my second 3-year term.
Is it all you expected it to be?
Actually, it's probably more than I expected it to be. Council is a little different position, obviously, and it's more about this business, city. And as a mayor, though, the main job of a mayor, in my opinion, is to really set the vision for the community, and then making sure that that's really what the vision of the community needs to be. So it's fun to be able to think through that and then to start to act on it and really bring some things in.
How have you grown personally through this experience?
I think what I've learned is how important it is for me to really pay attention to what's going on, what's the long-term ramifications of decisions we make, because there are things that come up that are local and very short-lived, and then there are other issues that are real long-term, and we can get into those at some point. But that's real important, because if you start to make short-term decisions that negatively affect have long-term consequences, it becomes a problem. So it's finding that balance of how to handle the short-term issues, but making sure it doesn't affect us in the long term in ways that are really negative. And
it's a heavy responsibility too.
It is, but that's really an important thing for us to recognize, that anything we make decisions about today affect our children, our grandchildren. And if we are not thinking like that, we're going to have some problems. We're just kicking the can down the road for them to deal with, and I just don't think that's being responsible as a public servant.
Well, in this 9 years, how have you seen the city change, grow, evolve?
It's been a lot of different things. We've had obviously growth in our economy. We've had growth in our population. We've had growth in our traffic, which there's some negative things about that, but there are some great things that are happening in Midland. And when you go back to our common denominator, which is our entrepreneurial spirit, our family-oriented community, all those things, those are preserved. And so as a result, if you can kind of focus on those strengths that we have, and then just build on it, we'll continue to have a viable community for a long, long time.
Of course, your popularity rests on how happy people are today.
Yes,
the
that's
day
true.
They're watching this. I'm pretty happy. What do you think the state of the city is today?
Well, today we're doing really well. Everybody has a job. Most people have jobs, and we still have an unemployment problem. It's not near what other parts of the country are having, and people that are employers are struggling with getting employees, so they're importing them from other places. So that's a good thing. We've got the lowest unemployment in the state and one of the lowest in the country. Sales tax revenues have done really well from last year to this year. Last year was a kind of an unusual year, but the city was in good shape. We were able to keep our tax rate low. We were able to not really cut any services that are significant to people, because that's where what happens when you start cutting things. Services are dropping, so we were able to find those balances. And I'll just say a thing for our employees that work for us here in the city. They are part of this game with us, and they understand the things that we are dealing with, and we're able to reduce their budgets last year, and there was a hiring freeze, and everybody pulled together to make that work. So where other communities were struggling with these budget deficits and the employees were really upset, we didn't have any of those problems, because our employees realize, hey, they're part of our community just like you and me, and they understand the situation, and they're working. So it really just shows that we're a good team, and to say 100,000 people are a team is hard to believe, but I really think of it like that.
Everybody rose to the challenge.
I think so. We all understood that we were in this deal together, and it really speaks to our community and to the employees that work, that serve us every single day, from the police, the fire, the sanitation workers. I can go on and on and on. And really, all the employees I'm around, and I don't know 900 employees, but I have met quite a few, and they're just great. They're really trying to do the best thing for us as a community.
Well, we're lucky.
We are fortunate. We really are. And if you go to other places, you'll recognize how fortunate we are as Midlanders. Well,
and you touched on our police and fire. Our crime rates have gone considerably down. Is that right?
There's some of the major, our type 1 crime overall is down about 11%. And that's, burglaries and rapes and murders, and all those individual statistics are down. There was one that was up, but overall we're doing really well. And I'll just credit it to the fact that we have a really strong police force, and we've got good relationships with the DEA and with the Sheriff's Department, and it just goes on and on and on. And as a result, that's coming down. The thing that does concern me is that if you ask citizens, do they feel safer today than they did last year, some of them will say no, they don't. And so we have to really be strong in our community to realize that the things that are going on in Egypt or in New York City or any other place really isn't happening here in Midland. Yeah, we have a drug problem, we have issues, but not to the extent that they are, and really Midland's doing really well. So we need to remember that when we get concerned about what we watch on the news, that those things are happening in other places and not to the extent that there as it is in here in Midland.
Well, it's good to know we may not feel safer, but we are safer.
Absolutely.
We talked a little bit about the economy.
Yes.
Touched on it a little bit before. Let's talk about that. We have of course, we're an oil economy, but we're a little bit of a unique economy as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone understands how the oil industry works. We all understand this boom and bust cycle that we've experienced in our history. This is a little bit different economy today, because what's driving this particular robustness has to do with the technology changes that have really happened the past 5 years in the industry, where you had areas that had basically produced as much oil as we thought they could produce. People are going back in there and finding ways to extract more oil from these new technology. And I can go into the particulars because that's my industry and my business, I understand it. But the point is, this is a little different than this economy that's driven by the price of oil. And I'm not saying it won't have an impact, because price of oil will always go up and it'll always go down. I guarantee that. So, but the amount of oil that is coming out of the Permian Basin for the next 10 to 20 years is significant, and it's going to be an incredible driver for the independence of our country and the viability of our communities, really of all of West Texas. Mm-hmm. So that's real different than what we've seen in the past, where if the price of oil goes up, Midland, Odessa does fantastic. If the price of oil goes down, we're hurting. But people understand. The other thing that's happened is we are more entrepreneurial based. We don't have as many big major oil companies here as we used to. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the resources that are being produced out here are locally owned, and those dollars stay home rather than going to Africa or other places. So that tends to turn over more in the Permian, and it applies to Midland, Kermit, Fort Stockton. It's all over the West Texas area, not just Midland, Odessa, but it's a good thing.
So there are more jobs, and there is a broad range of jobs. There are jobs for people who answer the phone, and there are jobs for the people who develop this technology to get us down into those reserves.
That's correct. And because everything kind of builds on that, you can find those reserves, but you have to have guys to drill it. You have to have companies that are providing all those services. So pretty much anybody that lives in Midland, Odessa, particularly, are we are all dependent on oil and gas, whether we're directly working in that industry or if we're just a doctor or a lawyer. We're all dependent on the oil and gas industry.
And you see this as long term?
I really do, and that's because of this technology. And I don't know that I can guarantee that technology will continue to do that, but it has always been that's been the case, that technology ends up driving and getting better and things happen. So I don't see that changing. But there are literally thousands of wells that need to be or could be drilled out here as long as the price of oil is decent.
So if we have good things on the horizon and jobs here and people coming in to take these jobs, what is the City of Midland doing to prepare?
That's a good question, because what the city needs to really do is prepare infrastructure, and that's a word that people really don't like, because what is that? Well, it's pipelines and roads and sewer lines and water lines and all those types of things that you have to have if you're going to have a viable community. You long-term have to have water. If we can, if we have a robust economy without water, or water that's affordable, then that's not going to work. So there are lots of things the city can do, and those are things that are most important to me. I'll just hit on water because that's my number one goal this year, is to have a executable plan for 50 years for our water. And so in the 60s we had some very forward-thinking leaders that did a great job, and that's what we are living on their hard work and dedication today.
From the 60s? From the 60s.
Mm-hmm. So we have to think in 50 years in the future. It can't be what's happening tomorrow. And we can talk about what's going to happen this summer, but what I'd like to think about is, okay, how do we make sure we have good long-term resources? And it's underground water we've got a field now that we can develop, and how to do that economically. We're going to need to lay a pipeline perhaps. Mm-hmm. I've got relationships with other communities. I've been meeting with Abilene and San Angelo with their mayors to talk about how they're going to solve their water issues. And then this idea of it's got to be regional. It can't be a win-lose situation where Midland and Odessa win, but Kermit loses or Fort Stockton loses. So we have to think about it globally, or regionally at least. And so that's what I'm trying to do in meeting with these. And so we do have these long-term reserves. Then if you have desalination, which is simply pulling salt out of salt water, that we have a pretty abundant supply here. That could be a possibility. We're talking about water reuse, which is using water that is not to drinking water standards, but less than that we use for irrigation. So there are lots of options, and the council is really working hard on this as a group. We're saying, hey, we need to get this during this term. This is something that we're focused on. It's a high priority, and so that's one of those things.
It's a high priority. How far ahead of any sort of issue are we?
We have great water for the next 25, 30 years. So it's not something that's a concern today, but if we want to be leaders like the leaders in the 60s, we have to think further. Now let's talk about this summer, because that's another issue, and we're going to probably face curtailment issues because there are 3 lakes owned by the Colorado River Municipal Water District. 2 of those lakes are dry. The other lake is not dry, but they are not able to pump. They don't have the pumping capacity from that lake. They don't have, and it's a long way away. It's Lake Ivy. So we could see curtailment issues from them. They've actually asked the city to reduce our water use this summer by 10%. So we've got a plan in place. We're working on some conservation efforts, and I think at the end of the day it'll look like we will just have to water our lawns differently, maybe every other day or something like that. So the volume of water is not the issue. It's when you ask for it. But that's something we've had in place for a long time. We have a contingency plan. We've planned ahead. It's the old concept of plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah, that's not new for Midlanders. We're used to watching out for our water.
We are. And now
Don't water the asphalt, water the grass, right?
That's true. Yeah, we have an ordinance about that. But the real issue is that you know, we've had this in place for a while, but we've never actually had to ration. We've had, again, based on these past leaders' work.
Well, now we're talking about preparing for this influx of people and just preparing the city. There are a lot of other things going on. We have a transportation traffic light system. Yeah,
that's a good one that we installed a few years ago to really reduce our commutes and to make sure that we were efficiently using our energy. If you're stopping all the time, then it's a waste of your money. And when we looked at it, and I don't remember exactly when that was, but say 4 years ago, that was the big concern is, okay, if we can invest this amount of money, how much will that pay back to our citizens? And you get your money back in about a year because of that savings in energy costs. And that was when gasoline was, you know, $2.50 a gallon. So that was really the impetus for that. And it's a system that is citywide, and at that time it was state of the art. We had the best traffic system in the country. I don't know if that applies today. So it was way ahead of its time. And as things change, though, you will have driving patterns changing, and so it's constantly being updated. And I've heard more comments lately that, golly, I drove to work this morning and I didn't have to stop at a light. That system's working.
What about downtown development?
Downtown's been real interesting because that was something that the city council focused on 10 years ago. And it just takes forever to turn around to downtown. We describe that as this downward spiral. And when it hits bottom, you've got to catch it or it just keeps on going. And we had that happen about 10 years ago. So the council started investing in downtown. We started thinking about it. What can we do? And as a result, our downtown is more vital today than it has been in probably 20 years. And it's continuing to get better. I can't take all the credit for that. It's got something to do with our economy. But the fact is that you've got some living downtown. There are people that are talking about more living quarters. There's even a talk about building a new building. And then all the things the city did with the redoing the park, that was huge, and people are using that. We had a great Christmas parade station there this year, or is it Christmas time? And so we are starting to come downtown more. The courthouse moved from the old courthouse to the new location. I'm hearing they love that location, and then we're going to figure out as a community, what are we going to do with the old courthouse? And that'll become our square, and everything will still revolve around that.
There's a lot of history there.
Yeah, and it's just a great gathering place, really good.
So downtown's growing. We have growth on the 191 corridor.
Yes.
That used to be just tumbleweeds and jackrabbits.
Yeah, that's our next loop. That's the way I like to describe it, because it's going to be the connector between Midland and Odessa. It is today, but it'll even get more and more so. And then a performing arts center going on, that's going to be a big draw for that corner. So that, and how you drive development, or how we're doing this, is by laying some of that infrastructure, putting in the pipelines, the water lines, and the sewer lines that need to fuel those businesses to make them grow. And NDC has invested in that. We are very excited. The city's going to be investing in the sewer line, and that's the kind of economic development things we're trying to do, is to say, okay, this can apply not only for new businesses that would want to come in, but existing businesses in Midland that are looking to expand, and they're looking for places that are on the loop. It could be retail, it could be restaurants, it could be hotels. There's just kind of the sky's the limit.
Let's talk about affordable housing.
Yeah.
I know the value of my home has gone up some, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good thing if you're selling, it's not a good thing for property taxes.
Well, but homes are still somewhat affordable,
true.
I think.
Yeah, it is. And there's
right?
always going to be a need for affordable housing. To say that we'll solve that problem is probably unrealistic, but we will continue to work on it. And it's this workforce housing for folks that are coming in that are young, or in the blue-collar jobs. They need affordable housing. And it's crazy if you have a great economy but no place to live, what good is that going to do? So our incentives have been based on, if you build a certain level of a priced home, then you could get an incentive from the city. We've tried to look at projects that are infill projects, like a neighborhood that hadn't developed, and we will put in, the city participates in putting in sidewalks or streets to try to help the developer reduce those costs, because when you buy a new house, part of the price that you're paying for that house is the street and the water lines and the electrical lines, everything that goes to it. But if you're in an existing neighborhood without that infrastructure, it makes those houses a lot more expensive. So we'll go in and participate and put those kinds of investments in those neighborhoods. And it really helps spur that affordable housing component, and hopefully we'll start making a difference. But it's just always going to be there as long as our economy is doing so well and our unemployment's so low. People need a place to live.
Yeah, you're talking homes or homes and apartments?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Apartments are a similar place, and we've tried our very best to find that balance between apartments and neighborhoods. We went through a real controversial one
Sure.
recently about that, and it's a balance, because we don't want to lose what we have about Midland. That's our culture, but we've got to have places for people to live, and those are those hot topic items that we come across, and we try to find the balance, and I guess time will tell what those look like.
Is the apartment topic still hot?
No, that one's not hot.
Okay, good.
We've had a few, but it's just interesting how those things come up, because they're not even planned.
Well, the front yard.
Yeah, the front yard ordinance was a real interesting one, because when I first started hearing about that issue, I thought, well, it's private property. You should be able to do what you want. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we found a solution that really helps. It found a midpoint, because the ordinance prior to that was you couldn't park in your yard, period, and the city wasn't enforcing that. So it forced us to look at what does Midland's ordinance look like. And at the end of the day, if you are my neighbor and you're parking in your yard, it's negatively affecting my property values, and it is one of those identifiers. The solution is to find this balance. If you live on a street that's not paved or has curb and gutters, then you have some leeway there. But if your street has curb and gutter and it has you should be able to park on you have to park on a pavement, and there's some exceptions. If you have a handicap sticker, that gives you a little bit of difference, and so it goes in place in May, and I'm sure once that'll start to happen, we'll probably hear maybe there's some things we ought to do a little bit differently.
So within the city, you have created something called the Culture Committee.
Oh, that's a great thing to talk about.
What's the idea behind that?
Okay, we've attracted a lot of young people to our town, and a lot of them are working for the city of Midland. And the old way of incentivizing employees is different. And so the city management, the city manager's office really came up with this idea of forming a culture committee, and it was formed by all the departments. They put somebody in on the committee, and they make recommendations on things that they would like to see, and came up with some wonderful ideas. They changed just some customer service issues. They put out this Feel the Energy, came from that. That's our new logo. There is a just kind of things that are important to them, and how they dress, how they work, how we get along. Mm-hmm. That's coming out of that culture committee, and it's such a refreshing thing to see that they're buying into it and they're really creating the culture. And if you talk to other people that aren't working for the city, but they are doing some of the same things, so it's going to be not just for the city of Midland. I think it'll apply to most businesses that are looking to, mm-hmm. Revitalize their companies.
Well, certainly you have to be inclusive. And just because minds are younger doesn't mean they don't come up with great ideas and see areas that can be improved.
It's really a bottom-up philosophy rather than a top-down, and that works, and it really works with younger people. And we just had a demographic change with this new economy. Really, we're in. We have a lot more younger people moving in. We have young families moving in, and if we're not paying attention to what they want, they won't stay here, because quality life is much important today than it was even 20 years ago. So those kinds of issues they're dealing with in that culture committee, and it's really refreshing. They actually use some Southwest Airlines examples. They have a cultural committee that they use, Southwest did, and it's one of the reasons why Southwest is so successful. So I just commend the administration to say, well, gosh, they were doing it. why don't we try to use some of the same ideas?
And the whole idea is to build the energy of the workers for the city and for the city as a whole?
Well, sure, because if the city's employees are happy, they enjoy what they do, they enjoy who they work with, they will naturally treat their customers, the citizens of Midland, in the way that they would want to be treated. So it just goes out, and with 900 employees, they're contacting lots of our customers, our citizens, and that needs to be a good experience for the citizens and for the employees. So it really helps, kind of spreads that energy to not just our culture in the city of Midland, but to the culture of Midland overall, and could have a huge impact.
You were born and raised here. You've put a lot of time and energy into bettering the city. Do you feel an energy growing? Do you feel it sprouting up?
Yeah, I'll tell you how the only thing I wish I was 25 years old living in Midland today, because I see the opportunities are just incredibly, they're just incredible. It just goes on and on and on. So yeah, I definitely feel the energy, and I understand that it's really coming from younger people, from new people that weren't necessarily raised here, and so it's just real refreshing to me. And I just wish I was 25 to be able to enjoy all the energy.
I wouldn't mind being 25 again either.
Yeah, there's some other reasons, but I don't think I'd be the mayor if I was 25. I'd be working every day. So
maybe in Wasilla, Alaska.
That's true.
Is there anything else that you want to let folks know, or
let's see,
anything we haven't touched on, any message you have for us?
I guess the best thing I could say, just as a message, is to remember what we're all about. And to me, it's family. It's doing the right thing all the time, treating others the way you want to be treated. And I know those sound a little bit corny, but they actually work. And if we can remember what Midland's all about, and trying to take care of each other, and seeing needs that are out there, from the issues at PBS to homeless issues to whatever, that works. And if we can do that as a community, we'll be less dependent on government, less dependent on those kinds of resources, and more taking responsibility for it. So it's this whole feeling of, let's be responsible for ourselves and our neighbors, and if we can do that, Midland will just always be a great place.
Well, it's a good city, a good, energetic population full of family and friends, and it's a good place to be, isn't it?
It's a great place. Thanks, Daphne.
Thank you, Wes.
All right.